As a tower climber, you're going to spend a lot of time working with ropes, but how much do you really know? Today, we're going to learn the ropes about ropes. Are you ready? Let's go. You're around ropes so often, it's easy to take them for granted. But I'm here to tell you, don't. I'm here with Loui and McCurley, CEO of Pigeon Mountain Industries. Loui, great to have you here.
Thanks.
Let's get right to it. You really can't judge a rope by its cover, can you?
No, you sure can't. Actually, you can have two ropes that look identical that are very, very different. Life safety rope looks like a lot of the same ropes that you'll find in the hardware store. Yet when you pull them in a lab or even in the field, you might find that there's thousands of pounds of difference between two ropes that look literally identical.
Let's get into the type of rope and rope material. What are the options?
Boy, there are lots. So historically, life safety rope has been made out of nylon. But performance of a rope has to do with more than just the material in the rope. It has to do with the construction. You have basically three concepts. There's laid rope, which is the three-strand twisted rope. There's kern mantle construction, which is a core and a sheath. And then there's a solid braid, which actually has a teeny tiny little hollow core, believe it or not. Depending on the construction of the rope, you're going to have different elongations, you're going to get different strengths, you're going to get different bend ratios, you're going to get a lot of different performance characteristics.
Now the colors of ropes, do they stand for something?
From manufacturer to manufacturer, yes they do, but as an industry, between manufacturers, no they do not. The coating that PMI uses, for example, is our nylon sheath is going to have a barber pole type design or a solid color. Our polyester sheath is going to have a X pattern in the sheath somewhere. So we like to have that little mnemonic for our customers to be able to tell easily which is which.
What about materials?
There are a whole lot of different options for material. Nylon is perhaps the most common. Nylon has really good elongation properties and it also has a lot of strength. So it's a nice balance between the two. Polyester is very similar to nylon, except that it is a little less stretchy as a fiber. And then we get into the newer, more modern fibers, such as aramids. Aramids we might know by the trade names Kevlar or Technora. It is, they say, 10 times stronger than steel by weight. So it's like a super, super, super strong rope. And it doesn't melt, right? So that's really cool. But what we sometimes forget about things like aramids is repeated bending abuse of an aramid will actually cause it to become less strong over time. But aramids are great for temperature resistance. So if you have hot work, that might actually be a good option. The other kind of material that is fairly common out there, it's called UHMPE, and we know it by the trade names of Spectra or Dyneema. That fiber is really, really strong, but it doesn't have the repeated bending problems that Kevlar has. What it does have is an abrasion issue, so it's usually jacketed in something other than itself. The other thing it doesn't do very well is it doesn't hold knots. Whenever you're selecting a rope for whatever application you're choosing it for, you need to think about how am I going to use this rope, what am I protecting against, and what characteristics does it need to have. For example, if you're going to fall, you probably need a little bit of elongation. But if you're going to lift, you don't want too much elongation. Then we talk about strength. Well, strength is really important. And you can get a really strong rope, but are they going to work with any of the gear that you need them to work with? No, probably not. There's the bend resistance. So the hand of the rope is how soft it is or how well it bends. And you can see even between these two ropes, there's a really big difference in how much they bend just with the same amount of force pinching them. So it's a balance. So what kind of safety factors do we want in our rope?
So you talked about testing of the rope. Are they all tested to a working load limit?
They are tested to a working load limit for industrial or utility type ropes. Life safety ropes tend to give you a little more information than that. We tend to work in minimum breaking strengths that are calculated based on a whole series of breaks, and we do a bunch of testing. And then we calculate 3 standard deviations below the mean of those test results and give you a break strength accordingly.
Rigging considerations are also important. What are some of the highlights we should know?
Well, the main premise is that rope is strongest in a straight line, right? So as soon as we change that straight line, we start affecting the strength. The tighter that we tie a knot in it, or the tighter that we bend it, the more likely it is to have damage occur to it. Abrasion resistance is protected against by the kern mantle construction. But you can actually put an edge protector in there that actually helps with the abrasion resistance.
Most tower crews are going to leave a tower rigged at the end of the day. How would that affect the life of the rope?
That's a really good question because it's one that we see in the field a lot, right? Everybody leaves their towers rigged. How is the rope anchored? Where is it anchored? If the rope is anchored over an edge, you're leaving the rope compressed or tied into that particular shape. If it's a day or two, not a really big deal. Week or two, you might want to start thinking about it. The other thing that becomes a concern is the weathering that happens inevitably, even in an overnight. We have the wind blowing. So your rope is dangling down and it's going back and forth. Well, what's it going back and forth across? Is it going back and forth across a portion of the tower? Are you getting any abrasion?
What about weather, like rain, sleet, and snow?
Any water is going to disrupt the construction of your rope. So especially nylon. So nylon loses about 10% of its strength when it's wet. So that strength comes back when it dries, but as soon as you have a moist rope, it's actually going to change the performance characteristics and you're going to lose a little bit of strength. The other thing is animals. You may or may not know that critters have been nibbling at your rope overnight.
What's the best way a crew can inspect the rope?
Inspection is a subjective kind of a thing, right? A guy with some experience has to do the inspection. It can't just be the newest guy on the crew. There's three aspects that you really need to keep in mind when you're inspecting. The visual aspect. How does my rope look? Does it look uniform? Is it not fuzzy? Does it bend equally, or is there a sharp bend at some point? Then there's also the physical part of it. You feel the rope, you run it through your fingers and you can feel if there's lumps or any kind of malformation in the rope. And then the third aspect is just what I know. What happened? How have I used the rope this day and what happened to it? Did I fall on it? Did it take an impact force? Did somebody drop something on it? Those kinds of things should be enough to qualify you to at least inspect physically more closely and possibly even retire the rope.
Lastly, what about terminating the rope?
That's a great question because anytime you put a rope in service, you're going to have to terminate it. In order to use it. And most often we do that with some sort of a knot in the field. The advantages of knots are that you can pretty much tie them anywhere on the rope that you want to tie them, so they're very convenient. The disadvantage is you lose some strength. Anytime you have a bend in the rope, which knots have lots of bends, you're going to lose some strength. So if you know that you're going to need to terminate your rope, it's a really good idea to have the rope pre-sewn. So order it with a termination. You can get a sewn termination or even a swage if you don't like the sewing. That's a really good way to retain the maximum potential of your rope without doing a lot of strength loss during the termination.
That's all great information, Loui. Thanks for being here and sharing your experience on one of the tools that we use every day on the job. There you have it, folks, a crash course on ropes to help you make a smarter choice. That's all we have for today. Thanks for watching and stay safe.